Hello, and welcome to another episode of Bad Lit Friends, the writing podcast that still barely knows what it's doing. I am Meagan Thompson-Mann, and this is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Kirk Rafferty.
And today we are talking about every writer's favorite task, revisions. Ugh,
Yes,
God.
yes. And before we get started, we have a little announcement. We lost one of our crew. Rylan has just, she's overextended herself is what's happened. And so she's had to kind of step aside.
She wants to be a writer. I mean, fancy that, a writer wanting to be a writer.
Yeah.
And,
How about that?
it
So
doesn't help that we had entirely too much to talk about all the time.
Yes. Yes. So she's our Spinal Tap drummer. We lost her.
We're taking applications, by the way, if you'd like to be our
That's right. You can be our drummer.
want to be our overwork, uncompensated drummer producer and occasional fill-in co-host. We'd love to hear from you. We're available at badlitfriends@gmail.com. We're promising nothing
And I do
but
want
a
to take a
credit.
moment. That's right. Exposure.
Yes. Exposure.
I do want to take a second to thank Rylan for all of her hard work. She
Yeah.
she put these episodes together. She edited them. She did probably more work than we did. So
I
thank you,
definitely
Rylan,
think.
for all of your hard work.
Rylan, you made this happen for us, and you're also an amazing co-host. And I just re-listened to the episode that I did with Rylan the other day, and we sound pretty good, and that was all Rylan's doing. So we're going to
Yeah.
miss you
So good.
a lot, not least because you kept us in line.
So you want to go ahead and jump right in?
I thought we'd do an update on where we are with our projects.
Yes.
So how
Where are you with your project?
where am I with my project? So I said that I would be done after 3 weeks. I am almost done after 4 weeks, but I will be done as of Sunday, and we'll be going through a lot of what I've been doing. I think can be useful in discussing this week's topic of revisions, because I've done 2 out of the 3 things that we're talking about. I'm in line edits right now, but I am looking forward to getting back to writing. I would like to say that I'm looking forward to getting back into querying. That is not true, but I will do it anyway. I got a rejection this week about a query that I had completely forgotten about, so that didn't hurt at all. It's fine. I chose a wedding dress after it. And I know in the last episode I mentioned that I was going wedding dress shopping. I in fact bought my wedding dress, said yes to the dress, and it is the black and blush wedding dress of my 16-year-old goth fantasies. So
Yes. It's so cool. You posted images. Was it
Yeah.
on Blue Sky?
Yeah, on Blue Sky. I will put a video of it on the Bad Lit Friends account. I'm always there for the likes.
It's
How about
great.
you? What
It's
are
a
you up
good
to?
I just turned in my manuscript.
Excellent.
And as soon as I turned it in, I found like really stupid errors in the first chapter. I'll be fixing that before anybody else actually has a look at it. But that's where I am.
Cool. So today's focus, as we said, is revision, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to know what to keep, what to fix, what to burn down completely.
Mhm.
And a little bit about drafts and how you can keep your mind focused during revisions. Now, Kirk, as I've mentioned before, is a sicko who likes revising a lot. And I am a sane and normal person who does not enjoy it, but has learned to do it, notwithstanding my grave reservations about how fun it can be. So tell me what you like about revising.
Well, what I love about the overall editing process is just that you're not working with a blank page. So you've got something already there, and you can start molding it, shaping it, kind of really turning it up. Because I will let you in on a little secret. This is not so secret. I've said this before. My first drafts are garbage. They're just terrible. It is me just kind of, vomiting onto the page, getting the ideas out there, and knowing that I'm going to come back and pretty it up. So I'm a much better editor than I am a writer. And so that's what I like about editing and revising, is that I just have something to work with. What about you?
Hate it completely because I think that I have a very different way of drafting. I tend to really work with the words as I'm getting them out, and this is very bad. I do not recommend this to anybody, but I'm trying to get a workable first draft as I write along so that I am unfortunately pretty wedded to what I'm writing so that
Mhm.
I have this kind of resistance to changing what I've done because I've already kind of shackled myself to God, I'm a genius. Wow, what flow. And it becomes, this humbling exercise. But as I've done more of it, especially this most recent revision, I've actually started to understand that humility is a really important part of producing a workable and enjoyable final product.
Mhm.
Humility is an underrated virtue, period, and that also carries over into writing as well. I think, one of the best places to start is to talk about what the terms are that we're talking about. Generally, there are 3 different kinds of edits that
Mhm.
people talk most frequently about. So, sort of from macro to micro, we start with a full rewrite of the book, which is basically you're rebuilding the book from the ground up. So you're recreating the novel. You're often keeping premises, characters, but you're restarting. So you're rewriting a lot of scenes. Maybe you have a new outline. You might be changing a point of view. So let's say you wrote this whole book and you get to the end and you're like, oh my God, this shouldn't be from, Joe's point of view. This should be from Kate's point of view. Or this shouldn't be
Mm.
in the third person, this should be in the first person, or it should be in
Yeah.
present and not in past, or it should be in 1872 and not, 2018. You're really redoing the whole thing.
And hopefully you don't have to do it that often,
Good
right?
God. Yeah.
And my guess, and because, this has been my experience, is that if you're a newer writer, you might actually stumble upon that, right? Maybe you get 20,000 words into this and you realize, "Oh god, yeah, like you said, I told it from the wrong POV,
Yeah.
or I'm writing in the wrong tense,"
Yeah.
or this is a big one too, is sometimes you're writing from the wrong voice, right? You started out omniscient, and then maybe you read a writing book and you go, "Oh, you know what? I should be writing this from Mary's point of view."
Yeah. I talked before about a romance agency romance novel that I abandoned because I realized I was writing in the wrong genre. I was actually
Mhm.
writing historical fiction. And I didn't wanna write it. I didn't wanna write an historical fiction novel. I wanted to write a romance novel, and had I accepted that and kept going, I would have had to have completely rewritten what I had already written, and I'd written
Mhm.
about 20,000 words. And, if you are a person who gets that far in and wanna keep going, wow. I mean, really good for you because it was painful for me to abandon it, but I realized that I don't have the chops to write historical fiction. That is not just me sucking up to you as my co-host, but I just it's not something that I think I can pull off.
You know what's another really common time when you might have to kinda, take a backhoe to your book is when you started in the wrong place.
Yeah, yeah,
So, you start, you started off well, I mean, we could do a whole episode on starting off on the wrong place in your book, right? So,
yeah,
yeah, so we'll put a pin in that and just say, yes, you might have to do it if you start in the wrong
yeah,
place.
yeah. So, the next level up, sort of in between macro and micro, is developmental editing. I've actually just completed that. So this is where you already have a manuscript and the architecture is essentially sound.
Mhm.
Your narrative works, but there are some problems. Things like pacing, themes, tone, trimming subplots, raising stakes, fixing
Yes.
plot holes.
Killing
This
darlings.
killing darlings. And I realized after I'd been querying for probably about 6 months that I needed to do a developmental revision. There's nothing wrong with my book. I didn't change the plot at all, but what I realized is that there were pacing issues.
Mhm.
There was a character, a main character, the villain, let's say, that I needed to spend more time with
Sure.
because the feedback I'd been getting was, "We love this guy. We love to hate this guy. We want more of this guy, and we wanna understand a little bit more about the dynamic between the main character and the villain." Okay, so let's put in some more scenes about him. I also needed to raise tension in a number of places,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I did that, I think.
And I bet a lot of that came in the dreaded middle acts,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it did,
And
it did.
that's where typically developmental edits are great. I mean, for overall, right? But man, the middle of your book is where you typically will see that middle act sagging.
Yeah, yeah,
And I do it too because, I get into the middle and I know where I wanna end, and I just wanna get to the end, but I know that I gotta, fill it
yeah,
out. So yeah, a
yeah,
dev edit on the middle is
I had a soggy third, let's say, not a soggy middle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I always knew that I didn't wanna have a soggy middle, right? So, I actually put the stakes pretty high right in the middle, but it was getting between the quarter and the third that it dragged, and I spent way too much time, at the women's retreat that is in that sort of moving between the quarter and the third. There were some fun lines in there, and people enjoyed them, but I also knew they were self-indulgent and they didn't actually move the plot along.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, I knew that most of my problem was going to be in this section. I cut 10,000 words out of my, like, 7th version going into my 8th.
Yeah.
That's a lot of words, and I didn't lose any plot, which should say everything you need to know about that 7th version and why I did not get an agent. And cutting 10,000 words allowed me to add 2 new chapters, which resolved the issues of people saying, "I want more of this character." Great, here you go. Also, I dealt with an issue of the main character's husband being what they call in romance novel, de romance landia, a cinnamon roll. I don't know if you're familiar with this term.
Yes.
Yes. So, a cinnamon roll, if you are not familiar with this term, is a male character, often a main character in a romance novel who is tough but sweet, and kinda ooey gooey and a little
Mhm.
bit too
Crunchy on
good.
the outside,
Yeah, and
gooey on
ooey
the
gooey
inside,
on
yeah.
the inside. The character was slightly unbelievable because he was so sweet. There was not any edge. So I needed to make him a little tartar, make him a little more sour, make him a little bit more believable.
Mhm.
And a little
Mhm.
and what came out of it was sparks,
Sure.
something banter.
And to be clear, if you're writing a romance, like, that kind of cinnamon roll is what you want, but you're not writing a romance.
No, I
Yeah.
am not writing a romance. So I needed
That's
to
why that
put
didn't
that.
work.
No, it did not work. I think one of the interesting things, for, at least for me, about doing a dev edit was that I got back into my book and really appreciated my book again after kind of feeling a little mushy about it for a while
Mhm.
because I saw that the bones were good. It just really needed to be tightened a lot. And now I feel great about my book again. So have you done dev editing at all in your revisions?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In fact, I would say that I'm trying to think. I spent about probably a month on just going through and really, tightening things up where they needed to be tightened. And I got to tell you, so I said earlier, like my first drafts are garbage. When I'm going through there and I'm cutting when I'm editing a first draft, there's not a lot of that first draft that's really sacred to me. There might be a turn of phrase here or there or a moment or something like that that I'll be resistant, but I'm pretty heavy-handed with the machete, going after that first draft. But After I had gone through, let's say, probably like a good 7 drafts, when and then I did a serious dev edit on this manuscript. It was hard, 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 because again, you're killing your darlings, right? You're kinda nip tuck, you're performing surgery on this thing to get it in shape, and I think you mentioned earlier, just some parts were a little self-indulgent. I really wanted you to really care for this character, and this moment just beautifully shows you how much you should care for this character, and, it just had to go. So, yeah, I did a full dev edit. On my previous book, I was not at the point in my writing where I felt comfortable, like, understanding what I should do in a developmental edit, and so
Mhm.
I actually hired a dev editor. And she's wonderful. She did a fantastic job for me, and she made my book so much better than it had been, and I learned a lot from her. And so when I did this book, I was very comfortable understanding the process of a edit. But, there is nothing wrong with going out and hiring an editor
No, not at all.
if you
Yeah.
need to do that.
No, I mean, I had done a dev edit between my first version and, my what I had thought was my final version. But honestly, it was the experience of writing book 2, or at least getting halfway through, which taught me a lot about what still needed to be done. That there's so much that you can learn on your own, but you really gotta keep learning if you're gonna do this on your own. I thought I had it down, and then I read more about it and went, "Wow, I have so much more that I need to do." And there's no shame in it at
Right.
all. It doesn't mean that you wrote a bad book. It just means that your book is not ready, and
Oh,
that's okay.
not only that, I would say that, even, you know, 99.99% of professional authors, and I say professional meaning they've been published, they've had some success, have to go through a dev edit in some way or another. Now, if you're working with a publisher and you're working with an editor, they're gonna do a dev edit with you. This is not something for beginner writers. Like, this is something that professional writers do. It is the rare writer that can just kick out a manuscript and it's publishable.
Yeah. Yeah. If you look at I've talked about this before when we were talking about decorative books in Hot Goss.
Yeah.
And you look at some of the 19th century writing out there, and a lot of it's available on Google Books.
Mhm.
It's out there, and you look at it, you're like, I don't even know what this is about. These are people who desperately needed an editor. Things were a little bit different back then. There was a lot of stuff that kind of got through, and
Yeah.
that's just not how publishing works, whether you're indie or whether you're trad pub. It's not how things work anymore. You've got to have something that is going to grab your reader because there are so many other things that readers could be doing. So
Yeah.
you've got to be ready. And doing a good solid dev edit, whether under your own steam or with the help of your beta readers, or an editor that you've hired, it's gonna get it there. So then we have the micros. So right now I am in line editing. The focus of line editing is you're looking at the words you choose, the rhythm of your sentences, how clear you're
Yeah.
being, your
Yeah.
style, your word choice. So you've already got a draft that you are pretty happy with. What you're doing is just smoothing and sanding. You're eliminating repetition, filler words, your funky syntax. I last night struggled with a sentence for, I shit you not, 20 minutes going, there's something really, really wrong with this sentence and I
Yeah.
don't know how to fix it.
Have you ever have you ever picked up a book and you're reading it and you come across a phrase that just, like, hits you right between the eyes? Like, you read this line and you're just like, "My god, like, this is so good." That is the result of a line edit.
Mhm.
There is about a again, I throw numbers out all the time, right? They're bullshit numbers, but there
17.
there's a 95% chance that this line that you just read did not come tripping out of the keyboard just automatically in place, right? That was the result of a line edit. And something that bothers me a little bit is that line editing and copy editing tend to be interchanged sometimes. And to be clear, like what you're talking about really is line editing.
Yeah.
It is, you said it perfectly. It's sanding away the rough edges. It's getting that right turn of phrase, or it's just getting the language to where it needs to be. It might be emphasizing your voice more, or it might be just making it pleasant to read. Now, a copy edit, on the other hand, is more about the mechanics of writing.
Yeah, yes,
So we're
that
looking for
that's number 4. We said 3,
oh,
but
I'm sorry.
yeah,
I
yeah.
jumped ahead.
No, 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 because we actually only said 3, but yeah, 4 is the corollary, right? Copy editing. Please continue.
Yeah, so copy editing is the mechanics, spell checking, grammar checking, and you might think, "Oh, well, I just look for the red squiggly lines." Well, you better not
Uh-uh.
rely on that. If you obviously, if you're hiring somebody and, to do a line edit and copy edit, you don't need to know that much about it. And actually, even if you're doing your own edits, maybe you're doing line editing and copy editing at the same time. It's easy enough to do, but there is a difference.
It's a book sausage at the end, right? So you don't wanna see how the sausage is made. So, some of the signs that you need a major revision, like a dev edit or even a, complete rewrite, are that your beta readers are confused about what your basic plot points are. Oh, that's not good. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, or your protagonist motivation doesn't make any sense.
Or they just don't believe the motivation,
Yeah, it's
right? Like,
unbelievable.
you've done a really good job of setting your character up, setting up, who this person is, and then they do something, and this drives me crazy, like in published books too. They do something so freaking out of character that it pulls me from the book.
Yeah, and there are ways to fix that, though. You can do the out of character thing if
Yeah.
you lay the
Yes.
foundation.
Yeah, I tell you something that I did for my current book that was
Mm.
pretty fun, actually. I'm completely derailing this
No,
conversation,
please
but,
do.
um, I had a character do something where you might think, "Yeah, I can see it," but it really stretches credulity,
Mhm.
and then I explain it all later.
You can do it as long as you are aware that you are doing something that is a little bit funky and that you're going to have to make it make sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do it. Also another sign you might need something big is that you just have this continuing feeling that there is something wrong with your book. You may not know what it is. Sit down and read your book again. Part of the problem with writing a book is that you get too close to the book to be able to remember what is actually in your book, and that you have to have
Yeah.
a plot. Walking away from my book for, gosh, it had been 6 or 7 months since I had completed revisions before I started this latest round, and I saw a totally different book than what I had seen in,
Mm,
I guess it was like January, end of January of this year when I just said, "Okay, it's done." And I also was like, "You know what? This is a good book, and I need to honor the fact that it's a good book by making it a much better book."
yeah.
So, yeah.
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 Stepping away from your book is obviously not editing, but it kinda helps with editing. One of the best pieces of advice that I hear, I don't know, I've heard it from numerous sources, is, once you finish your book, set it down, put it in a drawer for 2 weeks, whatever,
Yeah.
and just walk away from it. Like, try not to think about it, try not to dwell on it, or start your next project or whatever. Come
Yeah.
back to it after that arbitrary period, and then start editing.
I was much more dispassionate about my book this time around and could see it as not as my baby anymore, as not as a toddler.
Roommate that you you wish would leave?
Some signs that you might need something a little bit more minor, like, kind of line editing issues, are that the bones of your book are really good. but there are rough spots in terms of the prose, right?
Mhm.
So the sanding down, as we say. And maybe there are pacing issues, but it's not throughout or it's not focused in a largest chunk, but just in certain spots where you look through, you're like, that drags. How can I fix it? Or you're just tightening. You're just
Yeah.
tweaking. That's
And
something.
one thing that I've run into that I'm sure other people run into, I will get so deep in my head that I'll come across a scene or a chapter that is inarguably boring. I'm not even trying to
Yeah.
talk myself into it. And then make myself think it's okay because the next chapter is better. And man, you got to get yourself out of that headspace. I got to get
Yeah.
myself out of that headspace.
Yeah.
So if you write a boring scene, like you got to fix it.
Yeah, and there's a difference between a lull and, sometimes after you've had a lot of, high-paced scenes, you need something to kind of even people out, like, take it down, just for a moment, let people get a breath,
Hmm.
then ratchet it back up, and
Yeah.
certainly in thrillers, maybe that's not the issue, but, in a lot of other genres, it's not going to be bam, 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 Mission Impossible, start to finish.
Well, yeah,
It
then you're going to
Yeah.
exhaust your reader.
You're
Yeah.
gonna get but there's a difference between taking a breath and being boring. And, yeah, I found myself being boring. Beautiful, but boring.
Oh, mine was just boring, just straight up boring.
Yeah. It's like, kind of like some trophy wife, right? Just beautiful but boring. Yes. But, yeah, you don't wanna be boring, and you realize that you're writing that stuff for yourself.
Yeah.
And,
Or you're
that's
writing just to get through it, just to get to the good stuff.
Yeah, and while I was doing this edit, I kept thinking, "What would Kirk Rafferty do?" You know? I
Do
did.
not do that, do
I
not
no,
do
no,
that.
no, 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 because you told me a lot about how important it is to pare things down and to always remember that you're not the only person, hopefully, who's ever going to read this book. Right? So, if I'm writing it for other people, what do other people want to see? They don't want to see these long, extended, philosophical disquisitions into the
Mhm.
plight of being, a former English major. Doing this kind of work is necessary and dreadful, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be complete and utter pain. I thought we might talk about some of the really scary, like it's spooky season. Let's talk about the big scary revision topics.
Yeah.
So some of the big surgery, get out the bone saws. We've talked about some of these already. Changing your point of view completely. So you're like, "No, it's not Joe's story, it's Kate's story." What about killing major characters? Like, completely excising some I'm saying killing, but, like, in Kill Your Darlings, like, just
Sure.
excising somebody. Have you
Mhm.
ever done that?
Sure, sure, yeah.
Yeah?
I had a character in fact, just in this latest book, I had a character that just was not serving the purpose that I had envisioned them serving, and I realized this other character could actually take that on and serve that same purpose, and it would actually be a much richer story. So, yeah, I had yeah, I completely cut a main character out, and I did that fairly late. I wanna say around revision 4 or 5.
Wow, wow. I don't think that I have killed anybody so far.
Mhm.
So far. So I check in with me when I do it. I tend to get too focused on certain characters. And I've never killed a subplot in either of these books so far.
Oh, I've
So
killed
I
some
don't
yeah.
I don't which is kind of shocking, I think, because I am not a planner, as I've mentioned before. I'm a reformed pantser, and book 1 was written as a pantser, so I somehow managed to avoid that completely. Although I did chop out entire chapters, none of them cut out subplots.
And I'll just seg into a strategy. I think a lot of people understand this, but when you're doing this, when you're cutting all this stuff out, don't press delete. Like save that into like snippets or whatever you do.
Uh-huh.
Like if you're we're gonna talk about tools, I think next episode.
Yeah, next
So if you're
episode.
using Scrivener, there's a really cool way to do it. If
Mhm.
you're doing something else like Microsoft Word or Google Docs or something like that,
Yeah.
like just save them. Like never actually delete a thing because
No.
you may find out that you made a big mistake. And that
Yeah.
entire chapter that you just completely worked up because you had this brilliant idea, and then you're looking at it again later going, "Oh, I've made a big mistake." You're gonna wanna go back and,
Yeah.
put it back together.
Yeah. So if you're approaching a revision plan for something big, like a dev edit, did you have a plan or did you just kind of dive in?
Well, I didn't have a formal plan, but I had a pretty good idea of like what was I understood where it was like I had read through my manuscript again. I had a really good understanding of where it just felt like it was sagging to me. So I didn't have so much of a plan, but I did have like a target.
Mhm.
And so as I went through this thing, I did understand what I was doing. I don't know, maybe that's a plan. Is that a plan? That sounds
Kind of
like a
sounds like a
plan.
plan. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think maybe I had a plan, which was I knew where things sucked and said, "Okay, these are well, okay, I'll be totally honest. I had, I was talking earlier about funnels, and this is kind of how I thought about it as a funnel, which was going through and chopping what could be chopped, big chops. I had to add more villain. I had to give a little bit more structure to a side character. And give a little bit of resolution to what she's doing. And then after that, I was like, everything after that is just me going through and tightening, tightening, tightening. So I
Yeah.
had I had a funnel of the, big to small, and I followed it through, and now, theoretically, I am done tomorrow. We'll see. So,
Yay.
yay! Check in with me next week on episode 14 to see if this actually happened. So, but there are also these sort of targeted fixes that we can do when things are smaller. Things like pacing, go through, and if it's not actually pulling its weight, honestly, if it don't work, just chop it. Make sure that your characters' voices are true to who they are. The idea is that you should be able to tell who's speaking without any dialogue tags. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
ideal. So make sure that you're differentiating them enough. Plot holes. I found a plot hole. It was something as simple as how did the villain in this scene know that the main character was having marital problems. And that was super easy. I took care of it in 2 short sentences in a scene 3 or 4 chapters before. Super
Yeah.
easy. Bam. Plot hole filled.
Plot holes are really hard to find if you're the writer,
Mm,
but your beta readers are a gold mine for
yeah.
finding plot holes, so
Yeah.
listen to them.
And then clunky dialogue. One of the things that I do is I have software to read my book to me. This is like the absolute last thing I do.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
I have it read it to me, and it's built into Microsoft Word. There are plugins that you can get for Google Docs. Also, if you use Autocrit has a read back. I'm sure there are other software.
Mhm,
You're looking to get rid of, like, small talk, exposition, things that don't really add.
mhm.
People can be expository in dialogue in books. It does sometimes you need it. So, one way of fixing that is doing, this passes method. You do a pass for dialogue, you do a pass for pacing, you do a pass for description, you do all sorts of different passes. And hopefully you're focusing on sections where it needs it the most instead of doing an
Yeah.
entire pass and then do a pass at the end for the whole thing. So it worked for me for the last iteration of this, but I realized I was wrong, that it actually needed more help. But that's what time is good for. Time is also good for making you older and forgetful. So, what are some of the tools that you've used to help you with revisions?
I don't know that I have any real tools other than just going through and reading and deciding what I need to do right here.
Mhm.
For example, I'm in line editing mode. So I'm not doing a dev edit, I'm doing a line edit. I'm going through my manuscript and I'm just reading it and I'm doing line edits.
Mhm.
Uh Yeah, I wish I had more. I wish I had some tools to tell you about, but
Well,
I
I will
don't.
I will tell
But
you
you
about some of the stuff that I do.
okay,
So I've
cool.
mentioned some of them. I do the text to speech, which I find very
Mhm.
useful in the later stages. I go through my chapters one by one. I'm not moving on until I finish a chapter. Even as I'm winnowing down and doing my passes, I'm not doing each chapter like pass for pacing, pass for voice, I'm really focused on one chapter and putting that chapter to bed. And
Mhm.
then and that's kinda how I write as well, so that's what works for me. The other thing I use is I use software. I use AutoCrit, and I find it really useful for finding repetition.
Mhm.
So, where I've used a phrase multiple times in a chapter, um, or where I've used a very unique or well, it's not unique if I'm repeating it, but stand out flashy
Yeah,
phrase but used it multiple times in the entire manuscript, it's like, "No, no, 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 no." It pulls these things out. I find for repetition, it's great. Also for things like passive voice. I don't do a lot of it, but occasionally I do. Things like, where you're starting too many sentences with a conjunction,
sure.
like or when you're starting too many sentences with words like "and" or "but" or while. You don't wanna get rid of all of them, but after a while, it does get boring, so you're gonna wanna keep some of them, but you don't have to keep all of them. And for things like we talked about before, dialogue tags, where you wanna keep most of them being said or asked or replied. Your, little kind of unique zingy ones, you wanna keep it down minimal. Really useful for that. So, let's do some hot goss.
All right, let's do it.
Well, today, the hot goss is about Paul and Matthew and what is now being known as PenguinGate, not as in Penguin Random House, but in a book about penguins. And I was
A children's book about
a
penguins.
children's book about
Yeah.
penguins. So Paul and Matthew are influencers, TikTokers. I think they're also on YouTube. And they're a gay couple and they have done a lot of content about their relationship. They've got a really big platform. I was talking to my colleague about it today. She knew who Paul and Matthew were, not about this Penguin Gate, but she said, "Oh, Paul and Matthew, they have the cutest content." One of the spouses is partially sighted, and I guess a lot of their content is about getting used to this person going blind and their relationship and how it's grown, and also some pranking videos based on, this guy being blind. But apparently they've got a lovely relationship, and this isn't about them or their relationship or the fact that they are
Right.
gay or anything, and I wanna make that super duper clear. This has to do with them having some very strange attitudes towards marketing. From what I understand, the books are themselves are not the problem. It's the marketing, and in particular, what is being called pity marketing. I've seen it before, and we'll
Mhm.
talk about this in a second, a little bit more in other spaces, but that nobody's buying my book and putting up videos of themselves crying like, "I've only made 1 sale," or, "I've only made 2 sales today." And it's on TikTok, and there's a link to their, buy my book. I guess there was a video where one of them, Paul, said that his children's book about these 2 gay penguins had been banned, put that in scare quotes, and it was that the bookstore in question had to return 100 books that had been ordered because a store policy that Paul said was, or strongly implied, let's say, was homophobic.
And that's kind of the key there is strongly implied,
Yeah.
right? Because there was more to that story.
There is more to the story. Now, let's think about a bookstore. We're not talking about Barnes and Noble here. We're talking about, I think it was an indie bookstore buying 100 copies of one title. Now, that's a lot of books, even for a very large author, to have one store buy that many of. What was not divulged was that those 100 books had been bought for an author signing event. These are well-known influencers, for
Mhm.
lack of a better word, with millions of followers. It's not unrealistic for a large event like that to bring a lot of people. These are popular people. As I mentioned, my coworker knew who these people were, and outside of the book sphere. So, what a boon it must have been for that bookstore to think it had, these big people coming, and we're gonna have a big signing and blah, 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 blah. It is something seemed a little bit hinky about it. I'm not 100. Do you recall what happened exactly with those 100 books, whether or not it was actually proven? I think there was something
So
weird about it, but I can't.
so if I remember correctly, the original employee who had set that book signing up left the bookstore. And the owner decided that he or she didn't want to do this event anymore.
Uh-huh.
Now, I'm not clear on why they canceled it, why the bookstore owner. Maybe they're homophobic, maybe they're not homophobic. There's just no information out there saying
Yeah.
one way or the other. What we know is that the event was canceled, and because the event was canceled, the book order was canceled.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, we don't know exactly, and I think that a lot of the benefit of the doubt that people originally had for them started wearing away after the most recent pity marketing video, basically saying that Ingram is one of the, if not the biggest book distributor in America. And he said, it was Paul said, "Look, they made me change the title of the book. They were uncomfortable with it, and the original title of the book is was Pen Grooms. It was about two penguins getting married,
As in wedding grooms.
as in wedding grooms.
Right, right,
Yes, but I think that if we were talking about pen brides, we might not be having the same discussion.
right.
And I'm trying to see. Hold on. It's something like Finn. What was it? Oh yeah, had them change the name of the book to Pringle and Finn. And okay, I think right now in the particular space that we are, particularly in America right now, we don't want to use the word grooms.
Just thinking about the business of publishing, not that I'm an expert in publishing, that's actually a snappier title.
I agree with you. Oh, and then the other thing that had happened was that he said that the after he had ordered all these books with the new title, that Ingram refused to distribute it because he had fewer than 10 titles. So and that was true. I believe he had 5 titles at that time. Now, he was saying that meant that he was banned from Ingram. That is
Right.
not true.
Right, because every person publishing through Ingram is like, "Huh?" Like, I have 1 book, and they're just fine with that because go ahead.
Yeah, because there is a separate platform called Ingram Spark. This is for indie authors who have fewer than 10 titles. Now, you don't have to be necessarily an author with 10 titles. You can be like a small press, or you can be working, alongside other indie authors, and you're working together, but it makes sense. This is big. This is wholesale. They want to be able to make sales. That's why they have this rule for the big Ingram wholesale. There is a separate program, Ingram Spark. They were not banned from Ingram Spark. They were, in fact, referred to Ingram Spark, but they weren't interested in going with Ingram Spark. Instead, they went to TikTok and made a video about how everything sucked, everyone hates them, they got turned down because of their content, yada, yada, yada. And
Yeah.
then they went further. They posted the name of an employee of Ingram who they'd been dealing with, and then that employee got harassed by their fans. That's not cool at all.
Mhm.
This is, from my understanding, this employee is somebody who's got a few hundred followers on Instagram, versus somebody with millions of followers. Look, it's not cool. It doesn't matter where you are, if you are, someplace terribly evil like libs of TikTok, or your people who are probably good people like Matthew and Paul who are doing some really whack really whack marketing tactics. It doesn't matter. It's not cool. If you've got a
Right.
big platform to call out a little person, don't punch down. Like, never punch down. Anyway, it comes down to these banned book stories are a little bit weird, and they've also apparently, and I'm not saying this is necessarily true, but from what I've seen other people posting about online, is that it has resulted in greater sales for this book. I mean, good
Sure.
for them. They sold the book. And apparently the content of the book, it's fine. But it's the way that they've handled it. It's this woe is me. And I've seen members of the LGBTQ community, people who are authors, illustrators saying, "You're making things difficult for us. Why are you doing," if you're leaning into this saying, assuming that it's because of, you're implying that it comes from homophobia, right? And we don't know it. It could be true, they could be correct, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that seems to be pointing to this being a pure marketing tactic, which is cynical and sad.
At least a couple times during that whole fiasco, it's very clear that they misrepresented a situation.
Yeah.
So you sort of have to wonder what else they're misrepresenting on it.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this before the show. I figured, I mean, they have a following in them over 1 million, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think
Uh,
it's like 2,000,000 or something, it's crazy. Yeah,
if 1% of your followers buy that book, you are doing so much better than a lot of like popular named authors. So
you're doing
why?
Audra Winter numbers.
Yeah. So why? Why
Yeah,
do you need
why?
to do this? Why?
Why?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there
I don't know.
apparently was a video where, they're crying in front of boxes of books saying, "Oh, these are my unsold books all because of this, and all because, people are homophobic, or they are, they're biased against blind people, partially sighted people." And then I think somebody had asked for proof that these boxes were actually full of books, and he opened up one box and said, "Look, here it is full of books." There are a lot of funny posts right now on Threads. My hatred of Threads is not a secret, but today Threads was actually very funny. There were people just posing with a whole bunch of, like, empty Amazon boxes, crying in front of them, like, saying, like, "I didn't get my grilled cheese today. Look at all my boxes." It's, yeah, it's not making it any better. If you are in a position where nobody believes you, why would they believe you now? Frankly, everyone wants to see inside of every box.
Yeah.
Nobody believes it, and I think they had an opportunity to fix things pretty early on, where they could have said, "You know what? I was wrong
Yeah.
about Ingram. Yeah, you're right. Ingram." Oh, and then I forgot today's latest news was, I think Paul had posted something like he had turned down offers from 3 of the big 5 trad pub houses. Why? If you're out here doing these pity marketing crying videos,
Yeah.
why? Really? If you had 3 of them.
Especially if you're going with the narrative that Ingram won't take me on,
Yeah,
won't take my one book, even though that it's a complete bullshit argument. Yeah, that makes no sense. So you've got 3 of the big 5 saying, "Okay, we'll distribute your book."
yeah,
They have an incredible following, which means that any contract with any one of those big 5 was probably gonna be a pretty good contract. Better
yeah,
better contract than I'll ever get.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, a lot of it doesn't add up, and it's really too bad because I think you were mentioning the reviews on this book actually are pretty good. So
they're
it seems
fine.
like a
Yeah,
pretty good book. I like the new title.
yeah,
All you had to do was just ask your followers to buy your book, and you're probably gonna sell 50,000.
yeah, and,
Uh,
something else we were talking about before the show is you and I have both seen it on Instagram, and Threads, where There is pity marketing where people are saying, I only sold one book today. I
Yeah.
only sold 2 books this month. It's so sad. Who, okay, why are you telling me you're only selling 1 book this month or 2 books this month? What's wrong with your book? That's the first question I have.
Yeah. And and that's the thing, like, no judgment if you're posting out there saying, "I only sold 1 book this month," like, no judgment against you, but I don't know that that's the greatest marketing tactic.
I agree.
If
There's
I
ways
only
of
sold
saying that. There's ways of saying, "I only sold 1 book this month," that are positive, right? "I only sold 1 book this month. I don't care. Buy my book. It's great. Here's why." You know,
Yeah,
it
and just I don't know, from a marketing standpoint, I'm not a marketing person, but it just seems to me from a marketing standpoint, if you only sold 1 book, maybe just talk about your book. Don't
Yeah.
talk about your 1 sale. Because me as a consumer, if you've only sold 1 book this month, my big question is then how good is your book if you've only sold 1? So,
Well, I've
yeah,
sold none of my book, and my book is
I've sold none of
awesome.
my books either, so yes, yes.
Your book is awesome, my book is awesome, so, you know.
Right, and we've sold 0.
Yeah, but then again, we're not very good at marketing.
Right.
The main takeaway, I would say, revision, as you said, is where the actual writing happens. So that's great.
For me, it is, yeah.
For you, it is. It also sucks. And it's okay to understand that both of these things can be true at the same time. Revision is a really important part of writing if you ever want to sell your book or even just to get other people to read it. If you don't, then maybe it's just you who needs to read your book now. Just kidding. So let me pull that back. So, revision is where the real writing is happening and it does suck, but both of these things can be true at the same time.
It doesn't suck. I love it.
It does. But eventually you're gonna have to stop revising. I know how much you enjoy it, Kirk, but you do have to stop at some point,
I know.
There there can be too much of a good thing. So, next week, we are gonna talk So You Wanna Write a Book, Writing 101. Go right back to the basics. I gotta write this outline, so who knows what's gonna be in it. Trust me, it's going to be, perfectly cromulent. That's a
Yeah,
big
I
p yeah.
I feel like we're also going to have information that not just beginner writers need to know, wanna know, but yeah, I think we wanna kinda baseline.
Yeah, maybe you're somebody who has been writing short stories, writing poetry, or, writing for yourself, and you decide that you wanna get out into the big bad world of novel writing. Lord help you. It becomes an addiction. But, you know, we're here to maybe talk about it in some sort of constructive way. We don't make any promises. We're bad lit friends. So, speaking of which, you can find us on all of the socials at Badlit Friends. Threads, sorry, but it was where I found out the hot goss this week. Instagram, we're on Blue Sky. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms. Like, subscribe, share, make other people listen. Give us a comment. We need comments. I was going through our 2 comments and lovingly touched the screen. You
I
stroked
know.
them and went, wow, please give us another
Join
one.
Pam, join
Join
Pam.
Pam. Join Pam. Join Angela.
That's
Please.
right.
And also, I was reminded that Shane did leave us a comment, but I still can't read. I can't say that one. But it's thoroughly filthy. So, all I'm gonna say is go forth, rip it all up, save your backups, and we will see you next week.
Bye.